We're going to make this cute simplicity pattern. Not the skirt, it's awfully nice, but we're going to make the pants. The pants comes in 2 sizes, shorter and longer, and we're going to make the longer with 2 patch pockets on the front. Plus, I'm making it a bit challenging in that we're going to do a striped pair of pants. That means I had to be very careful as I was cutting out. This pair of pants, this patch pocket, is going to disappear beautifully. First up is the pocket and the pocket band. Fold this pocket band in half, lengthwise. Give it a solid press. Right sides together, pin across, and sew across. By the way, I only took a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then as well, I pressed down on the pocket band edge a 1/4 inch. Next, on the unnotched edge, I'm going to fold back where we just pressed in half, matching the 1/4 inch turn under with the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Match those up nicely. And then I will run a 5/8 inch seam from here to here. See, this side is all sewn down now, and I'm going to trim that seam just above the fold. So that it turns nicely. Turn right side out. Poke pin that corner out, just as crisp and clean as you possibly can. There it is. Now I'm all set up to press down this 5/8 inch seam allowance, and here's where the stripes kind of come in handy so I know where I'm really at. And again on the bottom, 5/8 inch up. That leaves this raw edge, which will be the hip seam. But before I top stitch, I decided to press in the raw edges one more turn. Okay, nice and top stitched close to the edge. And now it's time to take the front pant piece, see here's the crotch, and place our pocket up to it, matching notches, and we see the one and only chalk mark that we needed to make is the landmark to hit for the edge of the pocket. First, I'll sew this seam. Actually, I'll go in about 1/2 inch and just secure this. Then I'll come back and I'll top stitch these 2 sides. Top stitching in progress. I'm going about a 1/4 inch in. I'm very interested in matching up all these stripes perfectly. Corner turn. These stripes are kind of wild and crazy, aren't they? but I think they'll really look great on my intended subject for modeling. Then, because I couldn't help myself, I went around a second time. Okay, look, these pockets have turned out beautifully. See, they'll accommodate anything that you care to use them for. Now that we finished the detail, it's time to put these pants together. And as promised in the title of this video, I'm going to show you 3 different ways to elasticize or drawstring your pants waist. Now, warning, throughout I may very well use a 3/8 inch seam allowance because I think this might be a little close to call for my model. You go ahead and follow the 5/8 inch that's called for, or whatever you intuitively feel is right. Also, if you should get this pattern, you will find that I'm going to put the back seam and front seam and leg seams together differently so that I can show you these 3 different ways. You again intuitively get to choose which way you're going to do it, the way the pattern calls for or the way I'm going to teach you now. As well, I'm going to use a serger for needle to put together most of these seams. You don't need to do so if you don't have a serger. You can just straight stitch on your regular sewing machine. You can opt to cut out all of your pieces with a great pair of pinking shears, zigzag your edges, or use the serger. Okay, taking the front pieces, right sides together, pin and sew this seam. Serging seam in progress. Now go ahead and do the same thing with these 2 back pieces. And I want to tell you a little something. I have gone ahead and ad-libbed another aspect. The pattern calls for you to sew on a separate waistband. I thought to myself, why? And I just drew up 2 extra inches. The width of whatever the width of the waistband was, I just drew it on. I decided, why would I go through that extra step? Again, if you get this pattern, you can either honor it or you can follow my little shortcuts. Okay, which will become more apparent later. Okay, sew that back seam. And I did some pretty nice matching of these seams in back with the stripes, didn't I? Okay, serged side, all pressed to one side. Now place the front, the good old pockets, right sides together, and just pin together one side seam or the other. Does not matter which one. And we're only going to sew one side seam for now. Okay, so now you have one entire side seam sewn. And seen from this view, here's the back middle seam. Here's that long side seam. Front middle crotch seam. This is the time to serge all the way around as finishing the top of this waistband. Next, we need to get this 24-inch piece of elastic, which is 1 inch wide, on this great expanse of pants. And by the way, the 24-inch measurement is 85% of the actual waist measurement of the person intended. Okay? So again, how am I going to get all this on there? Well, first things first, find the halfway point of this elastic and mark it with a pin. Next, from the end and slightly overlapping, find the next halfway point and mark it with a pin. Lastly, do the same thing on the other side. Meet the middle and slightly past, because that's going to allow for a seam allowance, and mark it. You have now figured out your placement. Now, with the wrong side of the pants facing you, the wrong side, you now have your marks that you can match up at seams. Take the center seam and match it up with the center of the elastic as you just found it. Pin it on. Then find the next pin and pin it at the back butt seam. Now you'll notice a gap, but it's okay. This is all going to stretch nicely into place. Okay? Now, go to the last pin and match it up with the front center crotch seam. Then finally, match up your edges, pin them, and it's all going to stretch into place. Okay? Now it would be wise to place more pins, so we'll do that next. Starting from one side or the other, stretch out one segment. Walk your fingers in, pin in the middle of that area. Check for uniformity. The gaps are about the same. Stretches nicely. Go to the next segment. Stretch it out. Walk your fingers in, pin in about the middle. Check for uniformity, and if it's not uniform, just adjust it. Keep doing this all the way across till you have more pins in. Stretch, walk fingers across, pin in the middle of that segment, check for uniformity. Now here, see, I'm a little off. Not by a lot, but enough, so I'll just demonstrate. Move them. That's going to be better. Last segment. Stretch. Walk fingers in. Pin. Check. Little off. We're ready to sew. Okay, do this all the way across. Run from point to point. Home stretch. Leave that last pin in to the very last minute. Or it'll snap back on you. Okay, it looks like this after having sewn, running for the border. The stitching can be a little crooked, don't worry about it. Now find the middle, which is actually that side seam, that long side seam that you sewed. Bend it down the inch or so, feel for the edge up here, and pin it into place. Now, find that back butt seam, do the same thing, kind of stretch it out, fold it down, pin it. Find that last seam, the front crotch seam, stretch it a bit, fold it down the approximate inch. Then do that at the sides. It's a little familiar. It's kind of like you're repeating what you did before. We're going to stretch all this out, and it's going to be top stitched. And in this event, we are going to try to do our best to make the stitching straight and nice, because it's going to be top stitching that ends up on the front side. Okay, so just keep pinning however much you need to, much like you did before, to get this stretched out. And ready to race across again. This time it will feel like you have a bit more control. I feel like. Okay. Trying to decide if we should go from the front. You know, you could go from the front if you felt more comfortable. You just have to make sure that you catch the underside. Decide upon going in like maybe 3/4 inch if your elastic is an inch wide, as ours is, and then just carefully go. But I'm going to try it from this way and see how we fare, okay? Sew a few stitches in just to get started, 6 or 7 like we did before on the other side. Now stretch it out, feeling for the top of the elastic. I'm set at 3/4 inch for top stitching. stretch and go. Steady as she goes. Yeah, we're getting somewhere here. Home stretch again. Leave that pin in till the last minute. Looks quite good. Okay, guess what? I just showed you the hardest way of the 3 ways that I'm going to show you. So don't feel badly if your stitching didn't end up to be especially straight, or maybe you won't attempt this at all by the time I show you the other 2 ways, but I did want to show you this way. It is very sturdy. Just sew it this way. The elastic does not move. The other 2 ways I'm going to show you, it can move and maybe roll, but let's move on then. What we would do from here is you would sew this final side seam, wrong side out. And finish up from there. But because I'm going to show you the 2 other ways, I won't finish this side seam. I'm going to rip all this out for you so that I can show you the other ways. Be back. Okay, here's where we start with the second way of elasticizing this waistband. We have serged the top edge of the pants waist. Next, mark down 1 1/4 inches all the way across. And this is what's going to be your elastic casing, the press line for your elastic casing. Next, we sew this side seam that we left undone before. Fold out your press line and make your seam. And press that seam to the back just like you did on the other side previously. Now flip down your waistband casing and start pinning it in place. And as I go along, when I get to one of my side seams, I'm going to place my pin sideways, 1 inch or so on each side. Okay, and I'm only going to stitch around to the other side and leave this free. I'm not going to sew between pins. That way I'll be able to insert the elastic, thread it through the casing, come back around to the other side and bring it out, stitch it together, and there you will have it. Still pinning all the way around this waistband casing. Pin as many pins as you need. Now I'm going to take it to the machine and do as I said a moment ago. I'm going to sew all the way around from pin to pin, leaving this area free. Using the machine's free arm, I'm going to start at the second pin and sew in a little beyond the inch mark. Approaching that second and last pin now, we won't be sewing in between this area. Okay, I like to take a pretty big safety pin, it doesn't have to be this big, and pierce it through one end of our still 24-inch piece of elastic. Now I'm going to find that opening we left right here, and I'm going to thread this elastic right in, and I'm going to start creeping it through. Push it forward, hold on to it here, and then draw the waistband back. Push it forward again. See how with my right hand I'm pushing it forward. With my left hand, after a bit, I hold on to the pin and then just ease the waistband back. Keep going. And then ease it back. And it's starting to gather on itself, which is what you want. Keep turning the pants around and snaking or threading that safety pin on through. And every so often, go back and just kind of release it through. Now you have to be careful after a time. If there's only a small tail left, take a pin and secure that there at the edge real well, maybe even a couple pins. Why? Because if you get carried away with all that snaking or threading through of the elastic, you might accidentally lose this inside your casing, and you need this to be here for when you come out on the other end. So here I am, not too much further to go before I come out on the other side to where we secured the beginning end, something like that. So keep going. and stopping every now and then to even out the gathering of the elastic. Come back and feel for the pin. Okay, we're so close. We're right here with the pin, almost ready to pop out over here. And when we do, just pop it out. Try not to twist it. And once you're out, don't let that snap back in. Release these pins, and quick as a bunny, pin these with the safety pin so they can't escape you. Okay. And also, don't let this escape you. Pull it out fairly far. Take it over to the machine, because now we're going to run a seam, about a half an inch in, right along here, and get it sewn. With that finished, take out the pin, allow the elastic to escape inside. Allow the elastic to escape inside. And we're going to quickly run a seam, stitching in the ditch, which means right along this seam line that already exists, I'm going to run. Actually, I'm going to do it from the right side. To secure that elastic in place at the side seam so it doesn't roll. So I'm doing what's called stitching in the ditch, right on an existing seam. See? Then again with the free arm, in that same area where we just stitched in the ditch, I want to finish sewing right in between where those two pins were. So following your guideline and starting from where you left off, and also at the same time trying not to catch the elastic that's in there, although it's not the end of the world if you do. Finish that up. So now we've got it down here on the ironing board where we can look at it, and well, it's kind of all bunched up over here. What do? We simply coax it around evenly. Until we feel like we have it evenly gathered. Okay, that looks pretty even. Yeah. And there, folks, you have the second way of doing it. Very nice and easy, and it looks great. And there's just no fuss, no muss. You're pretty secure because you sewed it down on the one end, and you could actually do that on the other side seam. Once you get this nice and evened out, go ahead and stitch in the ditch on this other side seam, and you'll be very glad you did. Okay, now onward to number 3 method of doing an elasticized waistband. Okay, third time's the charm, because this is what the pattern is really calling for. Instead of elastic in the casing, this time we're going to make a pretty drawstring out of the same material. You could purchase cord material and get the same effect, but we're going to go through the steps for making our own drawstring. So just as before, you pressed down your 1 1/4 inch casing, okay? And then as the pattern indicated, you mark for buttonholes, because this drawstring is going to be looped through, of course, the casing and come out the buttonholes and tie cutely in front, okay? First we'll make the drawstring. Press down a 1/2 inch on each edge. Then the entire length, fold it in half lengthwise, and press it in place. Once that's all done, pressed lengthwise, fold in again once more. It usually works better to just do one side at a time. Get it as even as you can, match it up to that center line. Then fold it as narrow as possible. Do this all the way along. Top stitch all the way around. We're getting ready to make buttonholes in front for that nice drawstring to come through. Usually buttonholes are made through 2 thicknesses. One thickness, the interfacing, and then the other thickness. We won't be doing that. We're just going through the 1 thickness of fabric and its interfacing. So now let's go over to the machine and make 2 very nice buttonholes. We covered buttonholes pretty well in shirts and blazers, so refer to that video for help, and also your owner's manual. Alright, now we're ready to do as before, stitch around the casing, and then we'll have the fun of threading that nice drawstring through. Okay? Alright, let's go on our little adventure threading this drawstring through these buttonholes and all the way around. So in the leftmost buttonhole, I mean, you can go in the other one and go in a clockwise direction if you want, but being right-handed, I guess this is how I'll do it. Now you might have to fight it a little bit to get it started, but just get it started. There she goes. And do what I taught you before. Snake it through all the way around to the other side. Now this will be easier than the elastic, I feel like, and you probably won't have any bunching up or gathering this time because the string is so long. The purpose is for the wearer to cinch this as tight as she wants, and then it will gather at that time. Okay, so keep going all the way around. I'm just about to pop out this other buttonhole now. There it comes. Pull it out, work this through. Until these are streaming out the front, pretty much the same length. Okay, look how cute these turned out. Little bit of gathering, adjust it. You've got the drawstring coming out, the buttonholes. Let's take the pin out of the bottom of the drawstring, and now the pattern calls for just kind of making a neat little knot down at the bottom so it can never go get caught out of the buttonhole. See if I can make these even. Kind of a nut for evenness. And we might have made the drawstring a little long. You could always put another knot or two in there for looks. It might look great. We're going to find out when we get it on our model. All that remains now is the crotch seam and the inner leg seam and the hem, and then we're finished. Now, finally, pin that inner leg and crotch seam and then go sew it however it is that you've been doing all of your seams. Time to hem, and then we'll be finished. Now, go ahead and finish your edge however you're going to. Mark off the amount needed. Press. Then hem by hand, or refer to our video about how to blind hem with your home sewing machine. Finished.